Andrea Bocelli's voice has been described as a gift from heaven itself. His soaring tenor has filled opera houses, stadiums, and even the Vatican, moving millions of people to tears. To many, he is more than just a singer. He is a symbol of hope, proof that beauty can rise even from the darkest of places. But behind the elegance of his music lies a story filled with pain, loss, and tragedy that most fans never fully realize. Born in a small Italian village, Bocelli was diagnosed with congenital glaucoma at birth, leaving him with severely limited vision. Music became his refuge, but fate was cruel. At just 12 years old, a devastating accident during a football game left him completely blind. From that day forward, Andrea would live in darkness. Yet even as he rose to international fame, tragedy continued to shadow his life. Behind the applause and accolades were years of heartbreak, personal struggles, a painful divorce, and moments when his health nearly failed him. Each performance, each note, carried the weight of suffering overcome, battles fought in silence. Andrea. Bocelli's story begins in the quiet Tuscan countryside of Lajatico, Italy, where he was born on September 22, 1958. His parents, Alessandro and Eddie, were told early in the pregnancy that their son would likely be born with serious disabilities. Doctors even advised them to terminate, but his mother refused, choosing to give her child life. From the moment he entered the world, Andrea's journey was marked by both fragility and resilience. Diagnosed with congenital glaucoma, Andrea had only partial sight as a child. His world was already blurred and dim, but he found clarity in sound. Music became his language, his escape, and his guiding star. He learned piano by touch at the age of 6, then moved on to the flute, saxophone, trumpet, and guitar. But it was his voice, the instrument no one could take from him, that set him apart. By the time he was a teenager, Bocelli's voice was already attracting attention. He idolized classical opera legends and dreamed of following in their footsteps, though his parents hoped he might pursue a more stable career. To please them, Andrea studied law at the University of Pisa and even worked briefly as a court-appointed lawyer. Yet every evening he would return home to sing in piano bars, where he poured out his soul for small crowds. It was there, in those smoky Italian bars, that his voice began to touch people. Patrons often fell silent, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion that came from this young man who sang not just with technique, but with lived experience. Every note carried his struggles, his resilience, and his yearning for light in a world that was already darkening around him. Fate intervened in the early 1990s when Luciano Pavarotti, the greatest tenor of his generation, heard a demo tape of Bocelli singing. Pavarotti was stunned. He immediately recognized the raw talent and purity in Bocelli's voice, insisting that he deserved the world stage. That endorsement changed everything. Bocelli was invited to perform alongside Pavarotti, and soon after his career skyrocketed. Within a few years, Andrea Bocelli became an international sensation. His albums sold millions, crossing from classical opera into pop, breaking barriers that few thought possible. He wasn't just an opera singer, he was a bridge between worlds, bringing timeless arias to mainstream audiences who had never set foot in an opera house. Songs like Time to Say Goodbye became anthems, beloved across continents. And yet, even in those moments of triumph, Andrea's story carried a haunting undercurrent. Fans saw the success, the fame, and the elegance, but they did not always see the battles he had already fought, or the ones that still lay ahead. His blindness, his struggles with confidence, and the tragedies that marked his personal life were the silent companions to his soaring career. Andrea Bocelli had become the voice that touched the world. But soon, that same world would learn that, behind the beauty of his gift lay pain so deep it would shape every note he ever sang. For Andrea Bocelli, childhood was never easy. Born with congenital glaucoma, his vision was already severely impaired from the start. He lived in a world where shadows blurred together, where details were faint outlines, and where every movement required caution. Yet he never let this stop him from living like any other boy. He ran, played, and dreamed, determined not to let his condition define him. But fate had something harsher in store. At the age of 12, while playing a football match with friends, Andrea was struck in the head by a ball. The blow caused a brain hemorrhage, something doctors fought desperately to treat. Despite every medical effort, the damage was irreversible. Andrea lost what little vision he had left, and from that moment, he was plunged into complete darkness. The transition was devastating. Imagine being a child who could still see the colors of the sky, the outlines of loved ones, the light of the sun, and then having all of it vanish in an instant. For Andrea, it was like losing a world he had only just begun to know. The months that followed were filled with despair. He was angry, withdrawn, and overwhelmed by the feeling that his life was over before it had truly begun. Many children at that age dream of what they might become: an athlete, a traveler, an explorer. For Andrea, those possibilities seemed ripped away. He often described that time as one of his darkest periods when hope seemed unreachable. But what saved him was the one constant that had always given him joy: music. Even in blindness, he found light through sound. The piano, the flute, the voice, these became his companions in a world of silence and shadow. Where his eyes failed him, his ears sharpened. He began to hear music differently, more vividly, more deeply than ever before. Notes weren't just sounds. They were colors, emotions, and entire landscapes. His family played an equally vital role. His parents refused to let him sink into despair. They encouraged him to continue his education, to pursue law, and to keep playing music. They gave him a sense of normalcy, even when his life felt anything but normal. Their unwavering faith in him became a foundation on which he would rebuild his future. Still, the scars of that accident never faded. Blindness shaped Andrea's entire life, forcing him to confront challenges that most people could never imagine. Simple tasks like walking through a crowded street or traveling on tour became daily battles of resilience. Every performance required trust, not just in his musicians, but in the unseen world around him. And yet, through all of this pain, Andrea discovered something profound. Tragedy can fuel greatness. His blindness deepened his connection to music, making every performance not just a recital but a conversation with his soul. It was as if, in losing his sight, he gained a greater vision, one that allowed him to move people's hearts in ways that few others could. Darkness had fallen on Andrea Bocelli's life at just 12 years old, but it was within that darkness that his true light, the gift of his voice, began to shine brighter than ever before. By the mid-1990s, Andrea Bocelli had become a household name. His collaborations with stars like Sarah Brightman, his crossover albums blending opera and pop, and his appearances on the grandest stages in the world made him not just a singer, but a global icon. Millions saw him as the embodiment of triumph over adversity, proof that blindness could never stop true talent. But behind the curtain of fame, Andrea carried burdens that rarely met the public eye. His blindness remained a daily struggle, and though he carried himself with grace, the challenges were immense. Constant touring took a toll on his body and mind. Navigating foreign cities, relying on guides, and living without privacy was exhausting. Fans saw the polished performances, but they didn't see the quiet loneliness that accompanied life on the road. Personal heartbreak also marked his journey. Andrea married his first wife, Enrica Cenzati, in the early 1990s. They shared 2 sons, and for a time their family life seemed like a sanctuary from the pressures of fame. But as his career exploded internationally, the strains of constant travel and overwhelming demands seeped into his marriage. In 2002, after more than a decade together, Andrea and Enrica divorced. For a man who valued stability and family, the separation was a profound wound. Andrea himself admitted that fame had not come without cost. In interviews, he spoke of the pressure to live up to expectations, of the exhaustion that came from being constantly in the public eye. Unlike many celebrities, he couldn't blend into a crowd. His blindness made him instantly recognizable, and with recognition came scrutiny. There were also frightening moments when his health was at risk. Being completely blind meant that even the simplest accidents could prove dangerous. On more than one occasion, Andrea suffered falls, sometimes serious, that reminded everyone just how fragile his condition was. He once admitted that his blindness often made him feel vulnerable, even helpless, especially when traveling far from home. And yet, his biggest pain was often the weight of perception. To the world, Andrea Bocelli was a symbol of resilience, a man who had conquered every obstacle. But privately, he admitted that he was not always strong. He faced depression, moments of self-doubt, and the ache of lost dreams. He couldn't see the smiles of the fans who adored him. He couldn't watch his children grow, the simple joys of sight, sunsets, colors, the faces of loved ones were things he would never again experience. Still, Andrea chose not to let these tragedies define him. He found love again with Veronica Berti, who became his manager and second wife. Their relationship gave him renewed strength, and together they welcomed a daughter, Virginia, who became a new source of joy in his later years. But even with love, success, and global recognition, Andrea Bocelli's life remained marked by hidden pain. His blindness, his divorce, his health scares, and the isolation of fame created a reality far more complex than the image of effortless triumph. The voice that soared so high was born from a heart that had endured unimaginable lows. For Andrea Bocelli, tragedy was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of transformation. Every heartbreak, every struggle, every challenge he faced became fuel for a legacy that would inspire millions around the world. His blindness, which could have been a barrier, instead sharpened his other senses and gave his music an emotional depth few could replicate. At 66, Andrea is no longer just seen as a tenor. He is regarded as a living symbol of resilience. His voice has echoed in some of the most sacred and prestigious places on Earth: the Vatican, the Eiffel Tower, even the empty streets of Milan during the darkest days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when his performance of Amazing Grace gave hope to millions in lockdown. That single moment showed the world what Andrea Bocelli truly represented. Not just beauty, but courage, faith, and healing through music. Yet what makes his story so profound is not only his triumphs, but the way he has embraced his scars. Andrea never hid his pain. He has spoken openly about the darkness he endured after losing his sight, about the difficulties of navigating fame, and about the heartbreak of his first marriage. But instead of allowing these tragedies to define him, he wove them into his art. Every aria, every ballad, every trembling note carries the weight of his journey, the sorrow, the perseverance, and the unshakable hope. For many fans, that's why his music resonates so deeply. Andrea doesn't just sing, he feels. And when he sings, he allows the listener to feel with him. It is as if his blindness has given him a deeper kind of vision, an ability to see into the human soul. His later years have also brought new joy. His marriage to Veronica Berti and the birth of their daughter Virginia offered him a renewed sense of family. Performing alongside Virginia, especially in their now famous duets, revealed a softer, more intimate side of Bocelli, the father, not just the tenor. These performances remind the world that beyond the fame and tragedy lies a man who treasures the simple joys of life. And yet, the tragedies remain part of his legacy. The football accident that stole his sight, the loneliness of navigating fame, the heartbreak of divorce, the countless health scares and moments of vulnerability. They are the shadows that shape the light. Without them, Andrea's voice might never have carried the same power, the same truth, the same ability to move audiences to tears. At 66, Andrea Bocelli's story is both heartbreaking and uplifting. His life proves that tragedy and triumph are not opposites, but companions, that suffering can give birth to beauty, and that loss can teach us to cherish what remains. The tragedy of Andrea Bocelli is not simply that he lost his sight, but that he has lived with pain that few can imagine. And yet it is also the reason why his voice feels eternal, why his music will continue to inspire generations long after he is gone.